as we look at Jeremiah today, Jeremiah 18. In this story, God is the potter. That's what God wants Jeremiah to envision as he commands Jeremiah to go down to the potter's house, to go down to the pottery shop and see the potter at work. To come away with the image that God is the potter. God is the one who molds and shapes and brings things into being, creates with his hands. Now, this is not a new image of God as a potter. It's not addressed exactly that way, but go back to Genesis and creation. What does God do when he's created the animals and the sun and the moon and the stars and the plants and the fish and all that sort of stuff? And then what does he do? He takes dirt and shapes it into the form of a human and breathes life into it. He's a potter, taking clay, making something out of it, and giving it life and value. Isaiah, another prophet, said pretty much the same thing. He said, we are the clay, you, God, are the potter. We are all the work of your hands. Beautiful image. Beautiful image. It would be nice if a potter was so competent that he or she could throw a blob of clay onto a spinning wheel. If I don't know much about pottery making, but a wheel spins, and with some water and some movement of the hands, you can make ashtrays, toilet paper holders, something nice. I was impressed. Owls, pots, jars. Not every time a potter sits down at the potter's wheel does that come out right. There are lots of reasons for this. It could be the inexperience of the person working the clay. It can be that the clay is not balanced on the wheel, and as the wheel spins, it gets off balance and flings off. It could be that the clay's too dry, and you start working it and it crumbles. It could be that you try to do too much with the clay, that you want to make a tall vessel out of it, but there's not enough clay there, and you start building it up, and it gets too thin, and then the whole thing collapses. But what the potter does is, as Lynn said, he takes that clay, throws it back on the wheel, reshapes it, making it something else. At the potter's shed, we see the difference between clay that is workable and a finished product. I have a finished product here. This is from Tom Jones Pottery over in Fairhope, from 2010 Chili for Charity, Ecumenical Ministries. If you bought a ticket and went to that and paid enough, you got a Tom Jones piece of pottery. This has been fired. That means it's been put in an oven and heated so that it is rigid. That clay was taken and this was made out of it, and this forever and a day is what it is. It cannot be reshaped. This bowl cannot be made into a cup. Oh, you might use it to sip from it, but it's still a bowl. It can't be made into a candlestick. Oh, you might stick a candle in there and it work, but that's not what it's made for. It is forever and a day a bowl. Firm, solid, rigid, fragile. You drop it, it breaks. And then it goes in the trash. clay that the potter uses is pliable, flexible, shapeable. You can do anything with it. I don't have a spinning wheel for a potter, so I'm just going to work it with my hands today. You can be real creative and make a ball. My creativity rivals Lynn's. You can stretch it out. Make a toilet paper holder. Clay that has not been fired can be reshaped. It's spinning on the wheel and it falls apart. It's too wet. You can dry it out a little bit. If it's too dry, you can add water to it. It can be reshaped. It can be reformed. It can be reworked. It can be made into something completely different because it's pliable. This is the image that God has of us. Not this. We're never told that we are a finished product. Jeremiah goes down to the potter's workshop and sees the potter at work and has an image of God and God's people. God's people, people of Israel. Jeremiah is doing his thing about 400 years after David. 400 years, the kingdom of Israel in one shape or form has been there. But God says even after that length of time, they're still pliable. He can still work with them. You see, what's going on with Israel, they think they're hard and rigid. They've turned from God. They're doing their own thing. They have forgotten that their God shaped and formed them at creation. They have forgotten that their God shaped and formed them through the waters of the Red Sea. They have forgotten that God shaped and formed them when he brought them to the promised land. They have forgotten how pliable and workable they have been, how they have submitted themselves to God in the past, and how God has worked in them and used them and made him his people. They've forgotten all of that, and they've gone their own way. And the warning of Jeremiah to the people of God is that God is going to rework them. Now that can be good, that can be bad. God says, who you are now is not working. I have the power to tear you apart like a potter squashing a lump of clay, to rework you. I have the power to destroy you. And he says, it depends on you, Israel. If you turn from your evil ways, if you turn from denying me, I can rework you into something beautiful. If you want to stay hard and rigid, if you want to stay away from me, if you want to go your own way, then I'll just drop you. And ultimately, that's what happens. They are invaded, taken away into captivity because of their rigidness, unwillingness to be pliable in the hands of God. Sometimes we think of others like we think of a bowl. Hardened criminals. That means you can't do anything with them. Hard-hearted. That means they're so callous that nothing good can come from their heart. It means we've given up. They can be nothing other than what they are. Sometimes we think that about ourselves. I am who I am. I can't change. Or maybe I don't want to change. Sometimes the balance is off. Sometimes the clay is too dry. Sometimes our lives are just out of whack. But what we see and what we hear in Jeremiah is that God is ready to work with us and to reshape us and to reform us into who he wants us to be. Imagine that. God is not finished with us. Who we are, how we're living, what we're doing is not infinite. God can bring about change. God can reshape us. We acknowledge that. The song we sang after the confession and the passing of the peace was, mold me, make me, use me. I'm putty in your hands, God. Shape me the way you want me to be. That was what we sang. And in a few minutes, we're going to sing another song that says, you, thou, you, God, are the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after your will, while I'm waiting, yielded, and still. God says to the people of Israel, I'm going to break you down unless you change. If you change, I will save you. If you change, I will restore you. If you allow me to work with you, I can bring newness and wholeness. That's how we're different from a lump of clay. A lump of clay can't say, I don't want you to make me into something different. But we can. We can. God can not make us do anything. God can not make us use our gifts or to choose good. God can not direct our lives or our will to a new path if we aren't submissive and allowing God to work with us. We submit to God's hands and we are reworked. We yield to God. We are clay in the hands of God, allowing God to fashion us as he pleases. Paul says in the book of Romans that God's the potter and we're the clay. And some people God fashions into vessels for great purpose. Some people God fashions into chamber pots. Still needed. Still valuable. But not as flamboyant, as sexy as we would like to be. Putting our hands in the hands of the master potter. Putting ourselves in the hands where God works greed into sharing. Where God massages meanness into kindness. Where God works despair into hope. Where God works passivity into action. Where God takes the brokenness of our lives, the sin of our lives, and our confession, and our coming to him and saying, change my heart, O God, make me ever new. God reshapes hate into compassion. God is ready to rebuild you, to mold you and make you after his will. While we are waiting, yielded, submissive, giving ourselves, allowing God to work us as he pleases. Have your way with us, God. Shape us, even now. Shape us into who you want us to be. Thanks be to God.